We are going to update entries now. We're going to finally implement that aspect. So let's go to our expense view controller, which takes care of the form. We had added previously that if the route didn't contain an ID, then we would create a new entry. We are now capable of handling the other case. And what we want now is be able to pass something to our scope so that we're editing, so that we can access the object. But I'm going to show you first what you don't want to do in this particular case. So we're going to access expenses, get by ID, and put in the ID that we're receiving. This will load the entry that contains this ID and we'll pass it to our scope so we can modify it. And you'll see why you don't want to do that. So let's grab this one, the one that says tickets. I'm going to change some stuff, and I decide that I don't want to save, so I go cancel, which is basically a link that goes to the main page. But hey, it was edited and it looks horrible. So what happened here was that because of Angular's two-way data binding, we're actually modifying the real thing by modifying its HTML, its presence here in our view. So how can we avoid that? We can clone the object. There's a method in _.js called clone, which will copy all of the properties from one object into a brand new object, so that we're not modifying the real thing. See? Okay, cool. We've got that part now. Now we want to implement the saving. In save, what we had so far was generating a new ID and just pushing that new entry to our array. But in this case, we want something different. We want to retrieve that object and then we want to update it. We don't want to push something new. So there's two cases. There's the case when that object exists and the case when it doesn't exist. We're going to call this object that we read from the database, not the database, from our data set to update. And that will be service.getById. See how we're using getById a lot, and try to find it. If it finds it, then we want to update it. If it doesn't find it, then we should keep that code that we had to create a new entry. How can we update it? Basically, we want to copy all of the properties of this object into this existing object. And we are also going to use _.js for that. There's a method called extend. Extend will copy all of the properties from a certain source object into a target object. The target object goes first and the source object goes second. So this will copy all of these things that we modified into the existing object. Let's give this a try. So I'm going to change food for plain, change this value and this value as well, and save and see how it changed. We can go back and modify it again if we so want. So basically what we did was we cloned the object so that we weren't modifying the real thing in our form, and when we saved, we checked whether that existed or not, and if it didn't exist, we created it. If it existed, we modified it by extending it with the properties that the user entered.